Same house.
Same marriage. Two completely different lives.
He thought I was doing nothing. I was building everything.
My husband of 27 years handed me divorce papers on a Tuesday. He said I was financially non-viable. Those were his exact words. He told the judge I had no earning potential. He asked for full control of the house, the savings, the retirement, and he got it. Because for 27 years, I played the role he assigned me. The quiet wife, the good mother, the woman who did not ask questions about money. What he did not know was that little sewing business he rolled his eyes at, the one he said was cute. It had been paying our mortgage for 11 years. And his mother's nursing home for 6. And his boat, the one he took his new girlfriend on. Yes, that boat. This is not a revenge story. Revenge is for people who have time to waste. I am 58 years old. I do not have time to waste. Anna, this is a story about what happens when a woman stops asking for permission to exist. This is my story. And if you have ever been told you are not enough, I need you to listen very carefully. His name is Gary. We met in 1987. I was 22 years old. He was 24. I was a secretary at an insurance company. He was a junior accountant. Everyone said we were perfect together. He was going places. I was so supportive. That is what they said about women like me back then. Supportive. It was not a compliment. It was a cage. The first time he said, "I will handle the money, honey," I thought it was romantic. I really did. My own father never handled anything. He drank. My mother juggled bills on a typewriter at the kitchen table while crying. So when Gary said, "Let me take care of you," I cried happy tears. I thought I had won the lottery. I thought I had found a man who would never make me feel scared about money again. I worked until our first son was born. His name is Michael. He is 34 now. When Michael was 6 months old, Gary sat me down and said, "Why do you not stay home? Daycare costs more than you make." That stung. I remember exactly how it felt, like a small knife, not big enough to scream, but big enough to leave a scar. He was not wrong about the math. I was making $14,000 a year. Daycare for 2 kids would have been $15,000. So I quit, and I never had my own money again. Not really, not in any way that mattered. Here is what they do not tell you about being a stay-at-home mom in the 90s. You do not stay at home. You drive, you clean, and you volunteer at school so the teachers like your kids. You clip coupons. You learn to make casseroles out of nothing. You learn to stretch a pound of ground beef into 2 meals. You learn to say no to yourself so often that no becomes your first language. And you ask your husband for cash every single week. Every week. Like a child asking for an allowance. I remember one conversation exactly because it played out the same way for 20 years. I said, "I think $150 should cover groceries for the week." Gary sighed. He always sighed. He said, "Last week you said 120. What happened?" I said, "Milk went up and Tommy needs new shoes." He pulled out his wallet. He did not look at me. He looked at the money. He counted out 5 20s and 2 10s. $120, not 150. He handed it to me and said, "Make it work." That was our marriage in one sentence. Make it work. I got really good at making things work. I got really good at being quiet. I got really good at pretending I did not want things. New curtains, a weekend away, a dinner out where I did not have to cook. I stopped asking. It was easier to stop wanting than to keep being told no. But here is the thing about stopping wanting. It does not actually stop the wanting. It just buries it. And buried things have a way of growing roots. My mother taught me to sew when I was 9 years old. She said a woman who can sew never goes naked. She was funny like that. She was also poor, really poor. We lived in a mobile home, not a nice one, the kind with a leaky roof and carpet that smelled like cigarettes. Well, but my mother could take a worn-out dress and turn it into a skirt for me. She could take old curtains and make pillowcases. She could take scraps and make beauty. I started sewing again when my kids were small, just little things. Pillowcases for their beds, curtains for the kitchen, then a quilt for my neighbor's baby shower. People started noticing. They started asking if they could buy things. Can you make me one? How much would you charge? I did not know how to answer. I had never been paid for anything I made with my hands. I mentioned it to Gary once. I was maybe 40 years old. I said, maybe I could sell some of these at the craft fair. He laughed, not mean, just dismissive. The kind of laugh that says that is cute but not serious. He said, honey, you are not going to get rich selling pillowcases. Focus on the kids. So I did. For another 10 years, I focused on the kids. I focused on the house. I focused on Gary's career. I focused on everyone except myself. And every night, after everyone went to bed, I would sit in the living room and stare at the wall, not thinking, just existing, just surviving. By the time I turned 45, I had stopped asking for things, not just money, things, a vacation, a new couch, a night out with my friends. I had shrunk myself so small that I barely existed in my own life. I was a background character. And then my mother got sick. My mother had Alzheimer's. It came on slowly at first, forgetting names, forgetting appointments, then faster, forgetting how to cook, forgetting how to dress herself, forgetting who I was. I visited her every Tuesday at the nursing home, the one Gary complained about paying for every single month. And he never visited. He never asked how she was. He just wrote the check and complained. One Tuesday, my mother grabbed my wrist. Hard, harder than I thought she could. She looked at me, really looked at me, and she said, do not wait until you are dying to live. Then she let go. She turned to the TV. She did not remember saying it 5 minutes later, but I remembered. I have remembered every single day since. 2 weeks later, she was gone. I went home. I looked at Gary. He was watching football, drinking a beer. He did not look up. He did not ask about the funeral arrangements. He did not hold me. I stood in the doorway of our living room and I thought, I am not going to die in this house without ever knowing what I'm capable of. That night, I went to the basement. I pulled out my sewing machine. It was dusty. The thread was old. When I dusted it off, I threaded it, and I started sewing. Not pillowcases, something new, something no one in our town had seen. I made a patchwork tote bag, bright colors, crazy patterns, the kind of thing Gary would hate, and I loved it. I loved every crooked stitch. I loved every mismatched fabric. I loved that I had made something just for me. I did not tell him. I opened a secret email account. I started an Etsy shop under my maiden name, Holloway Handmade. That was my mother's maiden name, Holloway. I told myself it was just a hobby, just something to keep my hands busy. But deep down, I knew. This was my life raft. This was my way out. I just did not know where I was going yet. For the first year, I worked from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. every single night. I told Gary I was having trouble sleeping. He said, drink warm milk. And that was his solution to everything. Warm milk and do not worry your pretty little head. He never asked why I was tired. He never asked what I did all day. He never asked anything that required him to actually see me. My first sale was $24. I almost cried. My second sale was $18. By the end of month 1, I had made $142. It was not life-changing. It was not even rent money. But it was mine. No one gave it to me. No one approved it. No one managed it. I earned it while the man who handled everything was asleep in the next room. I opened a separate bank account at a credit union across town. Not because I was planning to leave. I did not even know I was planning to leave. I opened it because I needed to know I could. Does that make sense? I needed proof, physical proof, a statement, a balance, something that said Diane Holloway is not helpless. Diane Holloway can survive. Diane Holloway does not need permission. By year 2, I had figured out what sold. Not pillowcases, not curtains, memory quilts. People sent me their loved ones' old clothes. Flannel shirts from grandfathers who had passed away. Baby onesies from children who had grown up too fast. Wedding dresses from marriages that had ended or lasted. And I turned them into blankets. It was emotional work. I cried over almost every order. Not sad tears, honest tears. Women trusted me with their grief, and I did not take that lightly. I charged $300 per quilt, then $400, then $500. People said I was too expensive, but I was working 20 hours a week on top of running a household, and I was good, really good. And the reviews came in, 5 stars, 4 stars, 5 stars, beautiful work, so meaningful. Thank you for honoring my mother. Thank you for giving me something to hold. Gary never noticed I was tired. He never noticed the shipping supplies in the garage. He never noticed the extra fabric in the closet. He never noticed anything that was not about him. I could have painted the kitchen bright pink, and he would not have noticed until he ran out of coffee filters. That is not an exaggeration. That is just who he was. Here is what I learned during those years. A man who dismisses you does not do it because you are small. He does it because it is convenient. If he admitted you were capable, he would have to share power. He would have to share the remote, the garage, the decisions, the future, and he did not want to share anything. And not the thermostat, not the Sunday paper, not a single square inch of his life. So I stopped expecting him to notice. I stopped hoping. I just worked. Night after night, stitch after stitch, dollar after dollar. I started saving for something I could not name. A safety net, an escape, a just in case. I did not know what the emergency would be, but I knew deep in my bones that there would be one. There is always an emergency when you live with a man who spends more than he makes. There is always a crisis when you live with a man who believes his needs come first. In 2015, Gary bought a $58,000 truck. He did not ask me. He did not tell me. He just drove it home. I was standing at the kitchen window doing dishes. I saw the big red truck pull into the driveway. I thought it was a neighbor. Then Gary got out. And he was smiling. He was proud. I went outside. I said, "Whose truck is that?" He said, "Mine." I said, "How did you pay for it?" He said, "I got a bonus." I said, "You did not mention a bonus." He said, "I am mentioning it now." I checked the joint account later that night. He had not gotten a bonus. He had taken a loan against his 401k. He was 55 years old, and he was stealing from our retirement, from our future, from me. I did not confront him. I wanted to. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw things. But confrontation with Gary was like arguing with a wall. The wall always wins because the wall does not have to listen. The wall does not have to care. The wall just stands there, immovable, unchanged. Instead of confronting him, I doubled down. I worked harder. I opened a real website, not just Etsy, a website with my own domain, hollowayhandmade.com. I hired 2 women from my church to help with sewing. Helen was 63. She had been a seamstress at a dry cleaner for 40 years. Margaret was 71. She had learned to sew from her grandmother in Alabama. Those women saved my life, not because they sewed faster than me, because they saw me. They knew what I was doing. They knew I was hiding it from Gary. They never asked why. They never judged. They just said, "You are doing the right thing, honey." And that was enough. That was everything. Let me tell you more about Helen and Margaret because they deserve to be remembered. Helen lost her husband to cancer in 2010. She had 3 children and 7 grandchildren. She sewed to keep her hands busy because when her hands were busy, her mind did not wander to dark places. She was the fastest seamstress I have ever seen. She could finish a memory quilt in 2 days. 2 days. It took me a week. She taught me how to be efficient. She taught me that speed does not mean careless. She taught me that a woman over 60 is not invisible. She is unstoppable. Margaret was different. Margaret had never been married. She said she never found a man worth giving up her peace. I thought that was sad when I first met her. Now I think it is the smartest thing I have ever heard. Margaret learned to sew from her grandmother, who was born in 1898. Her grandmother survived the Great Depression by making clothes out of flour sacks. Margaret kept those stories alive. She told them to me while we sewed. She told me about her grandmother walking 12 miles to buy thread, about her grandmother trading a quilt for a cow, about her grandmother outliving 2 husbands and bearing 3 children. Margaret said women have always found a way. We just do not talk about it. By 2018, I was making $4,000 a month, quietly, steadily, while Gary was losing money on bad investments in a boat he could not afford. He thought I was clipping coupons and watching soap operas. I was running a business with 500 5-star reviews. I was employing 2 women. I was saving for a future he did not know existed. One night I got a notification on my phone. You have been featured on Etsy's editor's picks. I stared at the screen. Me, Diane Holloway, the woman who had not had her own money in 30 years, the woman who asked for grocery cash like a child. When the woman Gary called financially non-viable, I was an editor's pick. That was the moment I should have left. Not because I had enough money. I had $87,000 saved by then. That was not the point. I should have left because I had enough proof. Proof that I was not broken. Proof that I was not a burden. Proof that I was not the person Gary said I was. But leaving is hard when you have been told for 30 years that you cannot survive on your own. Leaving is hard when you have been managed for so long that you do not trust your own instincts. Leaving is hard when you are scared, and I was scared. I was so scared, so I stayed for 2 more years. And that was my biggest mistake. I want to tell you about one specific night during those 2 years. It was a Thursday. Gary had been drinking since noon. He came into my sewing room. He was unsteady on his feet. He looked at the fabric on my table. He looked at the finished quilts hanging on the wall. He said, "You really think someone would pay for this junk?" I did not answer. I kept sewing. He said, "I am talking to you." I said, "I heard you." I looked at him. I said, "People pay me $500 for a quilt, Gary. That is more than you made at your last job." He stared at me. His face turned red. He opened his mouth. Then he closed it. He walked out. He did not come back downstairs that night. I sat in my sewing room and I shook. Not because I was afraid of him, because I had said it out loud. I had told the truth, and the truth did not kill me. 2020, COVID. The whole world stopped. Gary lost his job in April. His company downsized. They said he was too expensive. They let him go with 6 weeks of severance and a pat on the back. He came home that day and slammed the door so hard the pictures on the wall tilted. He did not handle it well. He spiraled. He drank more. He started drinking at lunch, then at breakfast. He applied to 3 jobs in 6 months. 3. He told everyone he was consulting. He was not consulting. He was watching cable news and drinking whiskey before noon. He was disappearing into himself, and I was watching it happen. While Gary fell apart, my business exploded. People were stuck at home. People were grieving. People wanted comfort. They wanted memory quilts of loved ones they had lost to the virus. They wanted blankets made from their grandmother's sweaters because they could not visit their grandmothers. I was working 14 hours a day, sometimes 16. I could barely keep up with orders. And for the first time, I could not hide it. The fabric was everywhere. The boxes were everywhere. The sewing machine ran all day. Gary started asking questions. What is all this? Where's all this coming from? I told him I was selling things online. He said, how much? I said enough. He did not like that answer. He never liked answers that did not put him in control. One day I came back from the post office and he was in my sewing room. He was going through my things. He had opened a box of finished quilts. He was holding one. He said, "These are nice. How much do you charge?" I said, "Gary, please do not touch those." He said, "I am just asking. You are so secretive lately." That was the beginning of the end. Not because he found out the truth, because I stopped wanting to hide. And I was 55 years old. I had built something real, something that mattered, something that was keeping us afloat while he drank himself stupid in the basement. And I was tired of pretending I had not. Then came the conversation at the kitchen table, the one I will never forget. Gary had printed out a spreadsheet. He had been doing math. He said even with unemployment, we were short $2,000 a month. He said we needed to cut back. He said we needed to make sacrifices. I looked at him. He had gained weight. His eyes were bloodshot. He had not shaved in 3 days. And he was telling me we needed to make sacrifices. I said, "Or you could get a job." He was stunned. He said, "Excuse me?" I said, "You heard me. Any job, grocery store, call center, gas station, I do not care. We need money. You need to work." He stood up. His chair scraped the floor. He said, "I am not working retail. I have a degree. I have experience. I am not going to stand behind a register like some teenager." I said, "Then, what is your plan?" Because hiding in the basement is not a plan. Drinking is not a plan. Applying to 3 jobs in 6 months is not a plan. So tell me, what is your plan? He looked at me like I had slapped him, like I had betrayed him, like I was the enemy. And in that moment, I realized something I had been avoiding for 30 years. He had never seen me as an equal, not once. Not on our wedding day, not when our children were born, not when I held his hand at his mother's funeral. I was a supporting character in his movie, and supporting characters do not get to ask questions. They do not get to make demands. They do not get to have plans. That night, I made a decision. I was not going to save him. I had spent 30 years saving him, saving the budget when he overspent, saving the marriage when he checked out, saving his ego when he failed. I was done. He was going to sink or swim, and I was going to watch from the shore. I want to tell you about the week after that conversation. It was one of the hardest weeks of my life, not because Gary was difficult, because I was mourning a marriage I thought I had. Every morning I woke up and thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe he would change. Maybe he would see me. Every night I went to bed knowing he would not. I cried in the shower. I cried in the car. I cried while I sewed. Helen noticed. She did not say anything. She just put her hand on my shoulder and kept sewing. That is what women do. We do not need to say the right thing. We just need to be there. I called a divorce lawyer the next day. Her name was Margaret. She was 62 years old, gray hair, gold earrings, a voice like sandpaper. She said, "Honey, do you have any assets he does not know about?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Good girl. Do not tell him. Do not tell anyone. We will talk about strategy next week." I hung up the phone. I looked at my sewing machine. I touched the metal, the thread, the fabric. I did not want a divorce. I wanted a husband who saw me. I wanted a partner. I wanted someone who said, "I am proud of you," instead of "Who do you think you are?" But you cannot want someone into being different. You can only decide what you are willing to live without. And I was done living without respect, without dignity, without a seat at the table of my own life. Gary slid a stack of papers across the kitchen table on a Tuesday. Just like the day he handed me the grocery money. Just like the day he handed me the car keys. Just like he had handed me things for 30 years. He said he had been thinking. He thought we should separate. I said, "Okay." He said, "Okay, that is it." He said he thought I would fight for us. I said, "There is no us to fight for Gary. There is you, and there is me. And there has not been an us for a very long time. Maybe there never was." He had no idea I had already talked to Margaret. He thought he was surprising me. He thought I would cry. He thought I would beg. He thought I would fall apart. Instead, I asked for a glass of water. My hands were shaking, but my voice was not. That is what 30 years of practice does. It teaches you to be calm when you are breaking. When he said he talked to a lawyer, he said I was entitled to some things. But since I had not worked in 30 years, I stopped him. I said I have worked every single day for 30 years. I raised 3 children. I managed this house. I cooked every meal. I drove to every appointment. I volunteered at every school event. I took your mother to every doctor's appointment. I planned every holiday. I remembered every birthday. Just because you did not pay me does not mean I did not work. He said, you know what I mean? You do not have an income. The court will take that into account. The court will take that into account. He said it like I was a child, like I was a dependent, like I was a piece of furniture he was willing to give away in the settlement. I pushed the papers back across the table. I did not sign anything. I said I am not signing anything today. Have your lawyer send it to mine. He said, you have a lawyer? I said, I have a lot of things you do not know about Gary. That is not my problem. That is your blind spot. I walked out of the kitchen. I heard him yell something. I did not listen. I went to my sewing room. I closed the door. And I sewed. I sewed until my fingers hurt, because sewing was the only thing that made sense when nothing else did. The divorce was ugly. Ugly in ways I did not expect. Gary's lawyer asked for everything: the house, the retirement account, the boat, the furniture, the car. He claimed I had no earning potential. He said I was financially non-viable. Those words again. Non-viable, like I was a plant that refused to grow. Like I was a business that had failed. Like I was nothing. Then I got on the witness stand. I was wearing a blue dress, the one I made myself. Margaret asked me one question. One. She said, Mrs. Holloway, do you have any income? I said yes. Gary's lawyer objected. The judge overruled. I said I own a small business. It generates approximately $5,000 a month. The room went silent. I could hear someone breathing. I think it was me. Gary turned white. His lawyer started whispering to him. The judge asked for documentation. I handed over 3 years of tax returns, filed under my maiden name, Holloway Handmade, all legal, all above board, all mine. The judge looked at Gary. She was a woman, about my age. She said, Mr. Holloway, it appears your wife has been supporting this household for several years. Did you know that? Gary said, no, Your Honor. The judge said that is unfortunate, because ignorance is not a legal defense. I want to tell you about the drive home from that court date. I did not go straight home. I drove to the cemetery where my mother is buried. I sat on the grass. I told her everything. I told her about the business, about the money, about the divorce, about the judge. I told her I was sorry she never got to see me stand up for myself, and then I sat there for a long time. The sun went down, the stars came out, and I felt her. Not in a spooky way, in a real way. I felt her say, I always knew you could do it. I did not get the house. I did not want it. Too many memories. Too many rooms where I felt small. I got half the retirement account, which was not much because Gary had borrowed against it for a truck and a boat and God knows what else. I got the car, the old one, must the one with 150,000 miles, and I got to keep my business. That was all I wanted. The business, because the business was never his. It was mine, from the very first stitch. The day I moved out, Gary stood in the driveway. He looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I just saw him clearly for the first time. He said, you could have told me. I said, when? When would you have listened? He did not answer. He could not, because the answer was never. He would have never listened, not until he had to, not until he had no other choice. I drove away. I cried for the first 10 miles, not because I was sad, because I was relieved. I did not know I had been holding my breath for 30 years, but I had. And finally, I could exhale. I lived in a small apartment for 2 years, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen so small I could touch both walls at the same time. I did not buy new furniture. I did not take a vacation. I worked. I saved. I rebuilt. And slowly, without me noticing at first, I started to be happy. The women in my life became everything. Helen and Margaret from the church, a few others, widows, divorcees, women who had never married. We started a Sunday night dinner club, just us. We talked about money, about sex, about the things we were too afraid to say when men were in the room. We laughed until we cried. We cried until we laughed. We reminded each other that we were not broken. We were just late bloomers. I want to tell you about one Sunday night in particular. It was winter, snow was falling. We were all at Helen's house. She had made pot roast. Margaret brought wine. I brought a quilt I was working on. We sat around the table and talked for 4 hours. 4 hours, no phones, no men, no interruptions. At one point, Margaret said something that stopped me cold. She said, "Do you know what the difference is between a woman in her 20s and a woman in her 50s? We said, "Tell us." She said a woman in her 20s is afraid of being alone. A woman in her 50s is afraid of being trapped. I looked around that table. Every woman nodded, every single one. We were not afraid of being alone anymore. We were afraid of giving up our peace, and none of us were willing to do that again. By 2023, Holloway Handmade had 6 employees, all women over 50. All of them had been told at some point that they were too old or too inexperienced or too something. I did not care about any of that. I cared if they could sew, and I cared if they could be kind to customers. That was it. That was the whole list. Then last year, I got an email that changed everything. A property was for sale, a small commercial building with an apartment upstairs. It was in a town about 40 minutes from where I used to live, far enough to feel new, close enough to visit my kids. The building was overpriced, but it had a workshop on the ground floor, big windows, good light, and a kitchen, and so many windows. I drove out to see it. I stood in the empty workshop. I could hear my own footsteps echo. I closed my eyes and imagined sewing machines, fabric, laughter, women. I imagined my name on the door, Holloway Handmade. I imagined not renting, not borrowing, not asking permission, owning. I made an offer, low. They countered, I countered back. We went back and forth for 6 weeks. 6 weeks of waiting. 6 weeks of wondering if I was making a huge mistake. 6 weeks of checking my bank account every morning like it might disappear. Then on a Tuesday morning, they accepted. I bought a building at 58 years old with money I made, quietly, while a man who called me non-viable slept in the next room. While a man who said I had no earning potential sat on a couch drinking whiskey. I bought a building. I want to tell you about the day I got the keys. I drove to the building by myself. I parked out front. I sat in my car for 10 minutes. I was crying. Not sad crying, the other kind. The kind where you cannot believe something good is actually happening to you. The kind where you want to call your mother, but she is gone. With the kind where you realize you are not the person you used to be. You are someone new, someone stronger, someone who buys buildings. I walked up to the door. I put the key in the lock. I turned it. The door opened. The building was empty. No furniture, no fabric, no sewing machines. Just space, just possibility, just proof. I stood in the middle of the workshop and I yelled. I just yelled. Not words, just sound, just joy, just 30 years of quiet coming out all at once. I did not tell Gary. I did not have to. He found out anyway, because he rented a vacation home last summer, a little cottage on a lake. He wanted to impress his new girlfriend. Her name is Tiffany. She is 45. She has blonde highlights. She laughs at his jokes. And the owner of that vacation home? Me. He did not know. Of course he did not know. He saw the listing online. Charming lake cottage. $1,800 a week. He did not look at the owner's name. Why would he? He had never looked at my name on anything. Not a bank account. Not a deed. Not a marriage certificate. Not once. His deposit cleared. He paid me $3,600 for 2 weeks in July. He does not know yet, but he will. He will show up with Tiffany. He will unpack his fishing rods. He will put his beer in my refrigerator. He will sleep in my bed. And then he will see the welcome basket on the kitchen counter with a note in my handwriting. The note says, "Welcome to my cottage, Gary. The sewing room is off limits. Enjoy your stay. Signed, Diane." I am not going to be there when he arrives. That is not my style. I am not going to watch from the window. I am not going to hide in the bushes. Horn, that is what he would do. That is not what I do. I am going to be in my workshop, with my windows, with my women, with my sewing machines, and I am going to think about the look on his face, and then I am going to sew, because sewing is what I do. It is who I am, and no man, no judge, no non-viable label, no 27 years of being told I was not enough. None of that can take this away from me. I get messages from women every day, women my age, women older, women who say, "I wish I had your courage." And I always tell them the same thing. Courage is not something you are born with. It is something you build, one stitch at a time, $1 at a time, one secret at a time, one hard conversation at a time. This quilt I am holding is made from my father's ties. He was not a good man. He was not a bad man. He was a complicated man. He drank. He left. He came back. He left again. He died alone in a motel room when I was 32, but he had nice ties, and my mother kept them. And after she died, I found them in a shoebox under her bed. I turned them into a quilt. Every tie is a memory. Every knot is a feeling. Every stitch is a choice to forgive. Not because he deserves it, because I deserve peace. And peace does not come from revenge. Peace does not come from watching someone suffer. Peace comes from knowing you survived, you thrived. You built something beautiful out of someone else's mess. Gary thought I was broke. He was wrong about a lot of things, but here is what he was right about. I did not have money when we married. I did not have a career. I did not have a plan. What I had was a sewing machine, a library card, and a mother who told me I could do anything, even when she forgot my name at the end, even when she looked at me with empty eyes. Somewhere inside her that belief stayed, and she gave it to me. So if you are watching this and you feel small, if you feel stuck, if you feel like you have been managed for so long that you do not know what you want anymore, start small. A secret bank account with $20, a skill you learn on YouTube, a conversation with a woman who will not judge you, a library book, an hour before anyone else wakes up. Start there. You are not non-viable. You are not a supporting character. You are not the person he told you you were. You are the person your mother saw, the person your children see, the person you have not met yet. And she is waiting. She is so patient. She has been waiting for you to start. In every stitch is a choice. Every color is a memory. Every imperfection is proof that you are human. And you are not done. I am 58 years old, and I am just getting started. He thought I was broke. Now I own the building. Thank you for listening to my story. If it meant something to you, please subscribe to this channel. Share this video with one woman who needs to hear it, and comment the word stitch. I read every comment. Until next time, keep sewing, keep saving, keep believing that you are not done.